to my podcast that's for students, athletes, and those with career challenges dealing with performance pressure. In previous episodes to date, I've just been discussing issues of the meaning of the activities that you're involved in and how you keep that in mind influences the amount of pressure that you're feeling as you're performing. And for those of you that have watched, you'll know that that's been about the influence of those around us as we grow up. So, in particular, family, teachers, and coaches have dramatic effects on the way we look at the world. Today, I'm really fortunate to have a long-term colleague and friend, Dr. Darren Smith, who I met 30 years ago, and he's been an exercise physiologist and employed at the Australian Institute of Sport, as well as moved on to coaching multiple elite level international triathletes to World Cup and Olympic standard. I think he mentioned it recently. He's had 17 athletes attend Olympics and such events and multiple medalists. So, welcome, Darren. It's great to have you here today. And my first question would be, I believe that you've come to know a lot of your athletes quite closely, having spent time training and even lived with some of them over the years. Is that correct?
Good morning, Mick. Nice to be here. Look, we tried to do things really properly. So there was no online coaching. There was just lots and lots of detailed work, hands-on, each day, multiple months in a row. We had training camps in the best locations we could find. I was coaching athletes from all over the world, and I was fortunate enough to work with many of those athletes over multiple Olympic cycles. They joined me and my squad normally as unpolished and very keen athletes who wanted to further their careers. And so I guess the question of how best do we help them and how best do we help them quite quickly, because a lot of them were unfunded or not supported by their federations at this stage.
Okay, so we're dealing with people that need a range of supports as well, so not just highly technical coaching programs. Yeah, and no doubt you got to know them personally, I imagine, as time went on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, first of all, I must say that when I was looking for athletes that were likely to get the very best of themselves, I found over the years that some of them had this need or a quirkiness about them, something that wouldn't allow you just to settle for second best. Living quite closely with people day in, day out, you get to know
Mm.
their attributes, but also we did behavioral profiles. It was part of the mix in terms of setting up the squad. I didn't want too many people of a certain type of person behavioral profile that might underpin the dynamics of the squad. So there was a number of sort of categories that I needed ticked as they arrived. And also, as you understand, what is their motivation for getting good? Often intrinsic motivation is much stronger than, say, an extrinsic medal or money, fame, those sort of things. So, yeah, I was
Right.
looking for those quirky people. They often had a little bit of funky stuff going on relative to normal humans.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a strong desire to work and improve. The massive benefit I had was that these people moved across the world to join my squad. They were highly motivated. They weren't pushed. They were joining. They were paying
And
money.
that's a really, really relevant point, isn't it? To those of you that have watched previous episodes, we've talked extensively about, I guess, the motivation for the participation and those that are internally generated versus those external factors, as I mentioned before, family, peers, bosses who have a dramatic effect on the way we look at what we're doing. So don't you coaching individuals that are really quite special in their motivation to perform intrinsically, they're very keen.
Yes, to the point where some of them, it's borderline wanting to hurt themselves in terms of
It's
their pursuit.
okay.
They love to train. They
Yep.
don't want to waste a day. when they're away from
Wow.
family and friends.
Yeah.
Some would approach me if I wanted them to have, say, an easy training day or even a day off if something wasn't heading in the
Mm.
right direction, and they
Mm.
thought I was punishing them
That's drive.
by giving
Hilarious,
them a
isn't it?
rest day.
So, did you ever have the opportunity to discuss, why they're doing it in this way, or what it really meant to them that might drive them to do that?
Yeah, look, it comes up. They have a
Yeah.
suspicion that they could be good at something,
Ah,
and they're doing their best job they can in pursuing a coach such as myself. I was one of
yeah.
the world leading coaches at the time. Most of them were very keen. There were a couple that used to join and used to fight me a little bit, but one of their peers often pulled them aside after a few months and said, "Look, why don't you just do what he says and just shut up and do what he says?" And then amazingly, they started improving rather than. So the irony
Resisting.
for a few was to join a famous squad to pay money to an experienced coach, but yet sort of fight tooth and nail the whole way to change.
To change you might have to do with the extent of punishment that they're interested in. What's really salient, what's really interesting to me is that you're talking about individuals that have a suspicion that they might be good and could even be great at something. And that
Mm,
speaks really deeply to me in the sense that it sounds like these people, these kids, I guess, younger adults, had a dream of some type. They could imagine being there, standing on a stage, or finishing something with a great degree of mastery.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
One of the most recognized athletes I coached, Elisa Norden from Sweden, she joined me. She used to be a horse rider, an event rider.
Mm,
She joined
mm,
me from another coach. She couldn't really run or swim particularly well. She could bike ride really good. So
mm,
we taught her, but she had the ability to learn very quickly. And she was also
mm.
from the Swedish Viking culture. So she would do the
Yeah.
work. She had the
Mm.
personality traits of being calm and consistent, and I had
Right.
no question about whether she would do any of the required work behind the scenes. She
Right.
ended up with a world's under 23 title, a world sprint title, a world triathlon Olympic distance title, medals
Wow.
at world's 70.3, and an Olympic medal. It was an extraordinary journey for her and me, but we just did our best every single day. But
Right.
she was prepared to move away from her country
Yeah.
and travel basically
Yeah.
wherever I was around the world
Yeah.
for a good
Yeah.
number of years, like 6 or 7.
Isn't that just a phenomenal story of a dream, that became or that was built then on persistence and a very specific approach to achieving that dream, which from what we've chatted about in the past, isn't about performance, is it? That in the way others see it.
With Lisa joining us, we have to assess what her current skills were. And what I realized is there were very low-hanging fruit in a number of areas and some areas that were quite well developed. So we tailored the program to address all of those areas that we could make gains very quickly. But
Mm.
it wasn't outcome orientated. We didn't know whether we would take her to an Olympic medalist, or we would take her to 50th in the world when we first started. But our journey was to get her as good as she possibly could and to demonstrate that improvement on the world stage. So it wouldn't really have mattered to me if I'd wrung the dry of her talent over the next few years and she became 50th in the world. I would have been proud. It's as much as we could have got, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't wish performance. We only
Yes.
have certain abilities
Mm.
and we can't interact with certain people,
Mm.
and that might have been as good as we got. But, and was I even more proud that she became a world champion? No, actually, I wasn't.
Mm, mm,
I was still focused on, and we were still focused on the job of finding the most out of her and
wow.
demonstrating on the world stage. So, my job was to help those people reach the highest level that they could achieve.
Mm, mm,
That was it.
mm,
It was
mm,
quite simple, and we were very objective about it. We one of the things I was quite well known for was never talking to athletes about outcomes because we
mm.
never knew. She might have got
Um,
to a world level, but she didn't know and have any control over what other athletes do in the race.
mm.
We just had to do a really great job, prepare her so that she was excited and motivated to show the world what she could do on the days that mattered, and
So
then
really,
control what she could do. And
right.
you do the very best that you've done on that day in the preceding periods of training. No fumbles, nice and consistent work. You
Mm.
do the best job you can with your current skill set. You count the heads at the end, and that's what you get.
So we're really talking about an internal focus of progression and achievement here, aren't we? Which is the fuel that carries her through and generated by yourself and a very specific approach, which for those listeners that are not familiar with, is an amazing environment to be, and I use the word nurtured because really you're holding and helping them, to learn basically not only to stand and walk, now to run at their absolute best because of
Mhm.
the environment that you're providing. Fair to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's got to be holistic,
Mm,
doesn't it? Because the next
mm,
athlete I had join ended up becoming a world champion as well in
mm,
another discipline. But the personality was different, the culture was different from a different country, the
mm, mm.
the skills that person had coming into the program was higher in some regards and lower in other regards. So
Yeah,
I had to
yeah,
be very adaptable to,
right.
um, but the ethos stayed the same. Every day,
Absolutely.
every day, we did our
Yeah.
absolute best to improve these people and
Yeah.
to not just improve their skills and abilities, but
Mm.
improve their ability to demonstrate those skills when it mattered.
So another well, a really relevant statement, the implications of which are that as an elite level coach, it sounds to me, Darren, like you, bizarre as this may sound, wouldn't attribute an athlete's worth to a performance time or outcome, but actually to something like the type of human they are, the endeavor that they undertook, and the passion they took to this.
Yeah, they wanted me
Mm,
to help improve them.
mm,
Often they walked in hoping to be Olympians and so forth. We
mm,
had
mm, mm.
no control over that except for what we did on a daily basis, on a hourly
Yeah.
basis in the next period of their life. So that was our
Mm,
journey.
mm,
And I
mm.
just given those free reins of I want to be good, coach,
Yes.
tell me what to do or,
Right.
encourage me to do the right things,
Mm,
then it was pretty simple after that. We
uh,
just went ahead and did it and quietly
mm,
did it,
mm.
months and months at a time in training blocks. No
Without
frills, no banter.
without without worrying about what others are thinking based on guess what it is like an internal standard of mastering something. And are you able to comment, Darren, on this wonderful statement you have about flushing the toilet, which I think relates to others' views of your athlete's performance? Is that correct?
Yeah. So
Mm,
while we had a close-knit group, we had very similar ethos in that I would only speak to them about doing a great job. I
mm,
wouldn't speak to them about requiring you must win a medal for this, to be self-worth. There's nothing related to that. However, we live in a world where federations fund you if
right.
you tick a certain box, and
Mm,
they will
mm,
continue funding you if
mm,
you continue ticking certain boxes, and they will be outright performances at competition. So we are aware that you needed a top 5 at a World Series race
Right.
in the next 6 months.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no way that we can control whether you get that top 5
Mm. Mm.
other than what we do on a daily basis and do just the very best job we can. So there is
Mm.
no helpfulness by dreaming, wishing,
Mm.
hoping about the top 5, and we can prepare as well as we can, and we are aware of the top 5 requirement for funding,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
what can you control on the day? You can only control what you do, and why
Mm.
don't you just demonstrate the good work that we've been doing?
Wow. It's pretty a wonderful summary statement, I think, of Darren's attitude and his approach to facilitating a lot of his really fortunate athletes' amazing performances and indeed reaching Olympic medal standards. So, what an amazing influence and career that you've had, Darren, with
Mm,
obviously some pretty deep interpersonal connections along the road to help support that.
mm. Yeah, there has
Mm,
been. But I'll address
mm,
that question of flushing the toilet.
mm,
The flushing the toilet came about because not all of the ethos of the people we interact with is exactly the same. People care about what others think, no matter who they are. We don't live in a total bubble. But
mm,
we also
mm.
interact at competitions with staff, federations, people, others, interviewers that will ask or put outcome limitations to somebody. For instance, a reporter at the Olympics will not be asking how great their preparation was or how calm they are, how consistent was work. They'll be
Funny.
asking which medal will you win for Australia or Sweden? It'll be an outcome.
Yeah,
It'll be an outcome they ask,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
The federations, some people are just not that well trained. They might think that putting pressure on people is for an outcome is going to be helpful. So often
Mm,
they'll chat
mm.
in the hotel with one of my athletes about, needing to keep funding. We need a top 3,
Right.
whatever it happens to be, an outcome.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we developed this concept of flushing the toilet. It's basically
Okay.
flushing away the shit, which was the fact that we prefer to focus on the things that we can control,
Told. Right.
right? Which is the good stuff.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
shit is the stuff that we can't control, that it's pointless talking about.
The heavy
And that
weight
was,
that metal
yes.
can be hanging around your neck before it's there by the sound of it.
Early in my career, I coached in the UK and I realized that there was so much fear of failure.
Wow.
So
Okay.
people weren't I chose to reward my athletes with of their endeavor, not the outcome.
Yeah.
And so when you choose to reward people for how hard they try,
Mm, mm,
you see them blossom. If you reward them only for the outcome
mm,
or chastise them because they didn't get the outcome, you
mm.
don't see that blossoming.
So that's one of the really detrimental effects of this external focus, isn't it, really? I've
Uh,
mentioned before.
Very few people can put external goals
Hmm. Hmm.
and tell the world. And I chose to come at it in a slightly different way that worked for, the vast majority of my athletes
Okay.
over the years.
Well, Dan, I think that can only control what we can control ourselves is probably one of the main themes of today, along with the clear care and value for human worth that you have outside of the heavy weight of metals and other outcomes, despite them, being part of the picture. So thanks for coming on and chatting today. That was awesome and lovely to just hear a little bit of human background in how people can flourish in the right environment. So thanks again. We'll chat
Yeah,
again soon.
my
Bye for
pleasure.
now.